Welcome back to No Disintegrations. Dave and I break down our thoughts on what's going on from the prequels, the original trilogy, and the Disney Lucasfilm sequels, as well as Star Wars television series. If you want a different take on the science fiction genre, particularly Star Wars, we would be honored if you would join us. And remember, he's no good to me dead. Welcome back to No Disintegrations. This is episode number 8. Dave and I are going to be talking about the Ashoka Finale. Mixed emotions on this series, I think, honestly, and like as you explore the rest of the interwebs and some of the commentators and the typical folks that talk about Star Wars shows, you're getting a mixed bag of reactions. Some people were happy up until this point. Some people were disappointed up until this point. Some people have been like, well, it's an okay show. I mean, it was well done. There's some parts and pieces that looked really, really good from an aesthetic perspective. The special effects did not look as crappy as some of the other Disney shows that have been out there. And, costuming and uniforms and all that other stuff, like that stuff is pretty straightforward. That's the easy part, right? Like making it look nice is not a problem. There have been some great movies that have looked cinematographically amazing. I always think of that. What was that movie that the Wachowskis did with Mila Kunis?
Jupiter something or other.
Yeah, Jupiter Rising. Right?
Channing was in that too, I think.
Yeah. So if you need an aesthetically beautiful movie playing in the background while you're hosting a party, turn on that movie. Like the movie makes zero sense. I think the design of it was one of those things where like they were trying to build their next epic and the studio didn't catch on. So they basically made it a 2.5 hour movie with super cinematography. And like, you could literally just turn that movie on in the background and just let it play because it looks super cool.
Yeah, no, I've noticed that. I've seen just the half of it and I turned it off because I lost interest in it. But you're absolutely correct. It was visually spectacular in every way.
It is a aesthetically pleasing game, right? And so, movie, right? So that part I'm okay with. The look of the show is okay. The feel of the show is still like it's kind of confusing. One of the things that I didn't like about this episode is like as much as I like Rosario Dawson, her doing her own stunts limited the ability of Ahsoka to look good in the fight scenes, right? So she's been practicing a lot to handle the lightsabers. And like, look, if you're an American, you love Rosario Dawson because she's a great actress and she does a lot of good stuff. And I don't know if the limitation was with her or the limitation was with the way that they were shooting, but I think there was points where she looked very, very stiff.
I was still impressed with her. I think, this time she really, in the second half, I think she represented very well.
Yeah.
Especially in episode 7. The way she was portrayed even. That was Snips.
Yeah. Well, and
what I mean? And we see a lot more of that. It's like she was really wooden in the beginning, like she never had a sense of humor.
Yeah.
And then she kind of grew out of that.
Yeah. And I don't know
as the show progressed.
And I don't know if that was a choice, by direction or a choice by the actor or even, some notes from the studio, right? You just don't know. But, so you take it from the top, the show picks up almost essentially where it left off. Ezra's hanging out with Huang and he's building his lightsaber, which was cool. There were some great Easter eggs. And one of the biggest comments that I have heard from fans, both people that love, like are diehard Star Wars fans, but they're not so diehard that they've watched Clone Wars and Rebels. Like my nephew, who's, 18 years old, big time Star Wars nerd.
Never seen it, did he?
Love Star Wars, never watched Rebels. And so that, I think, honestly, the expectation that people have absorbed all the other Star Wars content actually hurt the storytelling for Ahsoka because there's an assumption that all these characters. And so, for an example, the Easter egg that Huang drops when he talks about Kanan Jarrus, he's like, oh, yeah, Caleb. And he calls him Caleb because Caleb Dune was who he was. Kanan Jarrus was his personality in Rebels. Mm-hmm. Like that was the name that he took on in Rebels. So Caleb Dune was actually Kanan, right? for us that have watched, the Bad Batch, we know who he was. We watched Rebels, so we understand that. And so that was a great Easter egg for those that were in the know. But if you didn't know anything, like, who cares? Like, why is he carrying this? What's so big about this lightsaber emitter? Well, that's Kanan's lightsaber. I had two in case he needed a spare.
I think all of this, you got two components to what you're talking about, in my opinion. And yeah, there's a risk of losing the audience because they haven't seen Clone Wars or Rebels. But there's also the plus side of it is Dave Filoni not letting that get in the way of him being true to the story. And this is why I'm really glad that David's around and he's taken up that mantle. And lastly, on that very note, I think it proves to everyone that the Clone Wars is not just a kid's show, man, at all. And there's a lot of adult content in that cartoon. And people are looking at it in terms of animation and thinking of childhood as opposed to the adult storyline that goes on for 7 seasons.
Yeah. And the other part of that, and Disney,
that completes the actual big screen story.
Yeah, and Disney has been very, very good up until recently about being able to balance both audiences, right? I give enough to keep the kids entertained, but there's another underpinning, there's an undercurrent of adult thematic content that keeps parents interested. And if you don't believe that, if you want to see Disney at its peak being able to balance entertaining children and adults simultaneously, go back and watch Aladdin, like the original Aladdin with Robin Williams. Like, there's so many deep cuts and there's so many jokes in there that kids are laughing because it's a blue genie that's being silly. Adults are laughing because of what he said. Yeah. And that was like the peak. And that was really when Disney kind of hit the high point of being able to balance entertaining children with adult themes and, bringing something for the adults that are in the room that have to take their kids to the movie.
There's always that balance, dude. You always have that balance. It's about ticket sales, man. It's always about selling tickets. It's all business is.
Well, you have to give, you have to give enough for both sides to make it interesting for the adults to want to be there and, cool enough for the kids to enjoy the actual aesthetic of the film, right? And
quick side note. Will Smith could never beat Robin Williams, not on his best day.
No. And again, the remake, and this is part of the reason why I think Disney is struggling, is because it's just like everything else in Hollywood. Everything is a retread now. Everything is a retread.
There's nothing new, dude.
Regardless of how good it is, everything is a retread. So, for example, and we're diving away from Ahsoka a little bit. We'll come back to that, but I just want to make this point really quick. And the point that I wanted to make is, like, if you haven't watched American Horror Story, great TV show. Like, it's Halloween time, so I would highly encourage you to watch it. The new season is literally a retelling of Rosemary's Baby with modern actors. Right.
I saw it.
Right. And it looks great. It's got a great storyline. It's engaging. It's enticing. It's got all these things. But when you really look at the underpinning story of it, what is it? It's Rosemary's Baby, which was done in the 60s.
Oh, by the way, that story was remade by an extremely beautiful actress, Zoe. I never get her last name right. Never. She, if Virginia was black, it's exactly what she would look like, man.
Yeah.
You know who I'm thinking of?
Yeah.
Zoe
Saldana.
Thank you. Yeah. She did a remake of Rosemary's Baby.
Yeah.
That was outstanding, dude, if you haven't seen it.
Well, and that's the thing is, it's like we're starting to get to the point where we're starting to recycle. And original stories are very, very difficult to get to. And Ahsoka is kind of an original story, right? Yeah. Like, when you think about it, Dave Filoni, when he planted the seed all those years ago, and you can hear all the actors and actresses that played in the Clone Wars, like, he had this vision, like, hey, wouldn't it be super awesome to see Bo-Katan in real life, right? So Katie Sackhoff has talked about that in multiple interviews, like, hey, when I first started on Clone Wars voicing Bo-Katan, Dave Filoni was like, yeah, one of these days you're going to get to see her in live action. You know? And she was like, oh yeah, that would be cool if they did, but like, how? And now here we are at that point. And I think, you kind of have 3 underpinnings going on. Like, if you look at it, now that we've reached the finale, there were kind of three major stories going on. Like the A story was Sabine and her trials to become a Jedi. Not a fan of that, honestly. And you and I talked about this, before we really got started. Bottom line is, it's like, look, we have not seen, at least to my knowledge, and I'm sure there's probably people out there that are just as nerdy or smarter than I am on Star Wars, but we have not seen a Mandalorian Jedi in well over 2,000 to 3,000 years, right? Because you had Tar Vizsla, who built the Darksaber, which has been an iconic piece of the Mandalorian society, but really that sword was not passed from Mandalorian Jedi to Mandalorian Jedi. It was conquering Mandalorian, period. Whomever won it in combat retained the Darksaber. So you have that. And then, the B story is like Ahsoka's journey of, accepting who she is in relation to Anakin and accepting who she is in relationship to her place in the galaxy. Two things that I have wrong with that. And the first part of it is it's like, okay, why in the hell did Ahsoka refuse to train Grogu into Mandalorian after she tried to train Sabine? You know what I mean? Like, you can't tell me that, like, you have a Force-sensitive child versus the worst Padawan ever, by Huang's own admission. You know what I mean? Like, why would you not take the time to train him versus training her? Like, what was the disjunct there? Was it the fact that Ahsoka, was not recognizing that she was a Jedi? I just happened to be this person that's trying to do good carrying lightsabers? Or am I living by my own code that doesn't fit with what the quote Jedi order would be? And then the third story is basically, and you could say it's potentially a fourth, but I think the third story is like Ezra and Thrawn. And it's basically everybody who was exiled at the end of Rebels and how they're coming back into the, the conventional galaxy that we know rather than the unknown regions. But those are kind of like the three stories that I picked out. And then the substrata underneath those is anything that has to do with Thrawn and Ezra also has to do with Shin Hati and Baylan Skull. And I mean, that was a really waste of a character, right? Like
both of them,
big, huge role up until like episode 7. And then they just drop off. And then you literally see her for maybe 30 seconds at the end of the finale.
Both of them. No, it was a waste of both of them, in my opinion. I mean, even at the end, you got Baylan, he walks off, God knows where he's at. Then you see him in the next episode, and he's just standing there on a cliff staring into space for 30 seconds.
Yeah.
And Shin, what happens to her now? I know she doesn't want to be there. She thinks this place is a godforsaken planet, and now she's linked up with a bunch of nomads to do what?
Survive.
Slaughter them or make them swear allegiance and fealty.
Yeah.
Who knows? And so when you take this whole episode, I mean, I think you nailed it when we first started talking. It felt rushed and disjointed. And I think of the loose change that it left behind. Baylan and Shin's definitely in that category. I mean, What was that? Okay, so great. They were here. Now they're just, standing around with their arms folded and shit? I mean, what is that? The other one is only Ezra makes it out. Everybody else got left behind and stuck behind in another galaxy. Where does that go? Where does that lead? Then lastly, and I think this is my biggest disappointment, is the loss of Morgan. I thought she was an outstanding character. She led the charge, and it felt as if Thrawn just sort of discarded her.
Yeah, as if she was irrelevant because I already have a night sister. I already have 3 night sisters. I don't need what's one more.
I got the OGs. They're on the ship. Even though she helped him do everything, he threw her away, man. Yeah, it was.
And the other part of it is that's a very un-Thrawn-like move.
I thought so too.
Because he's very, very calculating. So either there's something in season 2 that's going to happen with that, or not. Because he set the stage right now to literally increase he increased his enemy population by 3 by departing, maybe 2.5. And I say 3 because say for instance, Morgan Elsbeth comes back as a zombie, right? We've seen the witches of Dathomir be able to recover dead people and restore them, right? We've seen it with Savage Opress. We've seen it with Darth Maul. We've seen it with, multiple characters. Like there's a spirit, there's a ghost that took over in Rebels, right? Again, and that's a lost story to most people because most people didn't watch Rebels. So the first thing that I would say is like, hey, look, if you are a Star Wars fan and you like the way that Dave Filoni does business and you're a little bit confused about how Ahsoka went, between now and Ahsoka season 2, watch Rebels. And a caveat being the first season, yes, it was designed more for kids. It definitely was like a kids-oriented show. But just like all the other Star Wars animated series, the first season's kind of like the feeling out process. And then when you get through seasons 2 through 4, you get a little bit more meat on the bone.
I disagree. I disagree on that one. I think Clone Wars is really the initial 3 seasons is really, it's like watching a World War II movie. Yeah. Remember, Clone Wars is the gray area. The first 3 movies is light to dark, right? Yeah. But the Clone Wars is gray. And so at first, they're fighting the war, dude. They're fighting the Separatists. It's on, dude. You get to know the troopers. You figure out who some of the bounty hunter players are, and you see the industrial complex, just military-industrial complex, just freaking kicking into high gear. But towards the end of Clone Wars, what are you looking at? That the Republican was just Republican in name by that point.
Yeah.
I mean, so there's a different progression that takes place, and it's an adult progression.
Yeah. Well, I'm saying Rebels. The first season of Rebels,
mostly, yeah, I agree.
Is kiddie. I mean, like it was designed. It was on Disney XD. It was for teenagers. And then when they moved it over, I'm sorry, it was on. I think it was on Cartoon Network. I can't even remember because both of those shows ended up flip-flopping between channels. But the bottom line is the first season of Rebels was definitely more oriented towards kids. And then as time went on, it got a little bit darker and a lot more mature, and it was a much better show. So season 4, definitely way better than season 1. And even if you don't watch Rebels, go back and there's tons of folks that have done highlights or reviews or, hey, this is Star Wars Rebels season 1 in 20 minutes or less or whatever. Go back and watch those shows because those shows will fill in a lot of the gaps. And so you'll understand the relationship with Sabine a little bit better. And there's
especially in the 4th season.
Yeah. And there's a whole gap of information and time that's still missing, and that's the time after, the Empire's driven off of Lothal, and then Ahsoka and Sabine link up to go look for Ezra, right? And so there's a huge period of time that's unaccounted for. It's been 10 years, right? So it's been 10 years since the fall of the Empire at Lothal. And so there's still characters out there. And like, that's the thing that like I'm trying to be hopeful about is that Dave Filoni is trying to tap into the greater story writ large of Star Wars, so he's connected to the past with his utilization of, the Clone Wars. Like his tie to the original trilogy was his work in the Clone Wars and then the characters that carried over into episodes 3, 4, and 5 or 4, 5, and 6. Right. So he understands the old canon. He's a fan of the old canon, so he's bringing in all these little trickles and things that you see from like they've mentioned Revan and they've mentioned this person, they mentioned that person. And so all of those are good. But when we get to the point where it's like, okay, where is this going next? Because you're trying to basically tie it to a much greater universe that not a lot of people are familiar with. And honestly, that's my biggest takeaway from the Ahsoka series is there are so many deep cuts. Like if you did not watch Rebels, you have no idea who Kanan Jarrus is. You have no idea that Sabine has been trained on a lightsaber. What's this Mandalorian doing running around with a lightsaber? Because up until this point, if you're a casual fan, the only other Mandalorian you've seen wield a lightsaber has been Bo-Katan, and Mando, right? And there's a marked difference between how those two handle the Darksaber, but the Darksaber has a spiritual component to it, right? Because it's tied to control of Mandalore, which is a way deeper story than, Sabine and a lightsaber. Well, here's the other part, right? At some point during all of this, Sabine has to build a lightsaber. She has to, or she can't be a Jedi.
Or she can't be a Jedi.
Right? She can't be. And that's one of the things that's one of the things. Or are we just abandoning, are we abandoning all aspects of the old order, and saying, okay, yeah, it's perfectly okay for you to pick up a lightsaber, or have a lightsaber handed to you. Well, given the fact that Sabine's a Mandalorian, and the last Mandalorian that was handed a lightsaber basically led to the downfall of the entire Mandalorian race. Probably not a good idea, right? Probably not a good idea for Sabine to be running around with a lightsaber that was handed to her, based off of everything else that we've observed as Star Wars fans, right? Not because of anything other than that.
And that's a great point to make too. I didn't even think about that, because she's actually running around with Ezra's old saber.
Correct.
And he gave it to her, and since it was a gift, he refused to take it back, even if they were in a fight, which is typical Ezra. It was an Ezra thing. Even when me and Mia were watching last night, she made a comment. Ezra started dragging a body off the out of the way, and I said, "Why didn't he just throw him off the ship to hide the bodies? He's standing right there." And here's what Mia said to me. She says, "Yeah, but he's Ezra. If you know Ezra like I do, I know exactly what he's doing." And she nailed it.
Yeah.
Straight up ganked that dude's armor and probably hit out on that ship the whole way.
Yeah, which makes sense. And again, it goes
a lot of sense.
And it's simple stuff, right? And it's all about the discussion of, the character quirks. I think, like I said, from the casting perspective, and I'll say this, as watching the show and kind of reviewing the bidding on it, I think legitimately, it could have been Ashley Eckstein just as easily as it was Rosario Dawson, but I think from that perspective, I think both of those guys are cool, or gals are cool with, the transition of the character.
I disagree. I disagree completely. As much as I'm a fan of Ashley, big time fan of her, she's a voice actress.
Yeah.
It's very different. This is not physical acting like Rosario's trained in.
Yeah,
but it was good of her to step out of that, I think.
But I think regardless of how that happened, I think either one of them could have done a good job from the acting perspective. You know what I mean? Voice actors are good, man. Like if you really
Ashley's physical enough, I think she could have maybe
she could have pulled it off. But from the perspective of like watching, if you really want to watch something interesting, go back and look at Sam Witwer's portrayal of Maul. Like, look at all the behind the scenes stuff that he did as
he was a hell of an athlete, man. Dude, he did a lot of that.
When you watch when you watch Sam Witwer act, even his voice acting, it's super, super intense. And like that was his thing, and that's why like the portrayal of Maul was so gritty and grounded, is because this guy is giving his all in the sound booth to make it happen. And I don't feel like I got that level of like effort in the Ahsoka show. It's live action. Like I want it to be to the point where it's like, damn, like, yes. Like, and for me, like when I watch The Mandalorian, like, all three of the actors that play the Mando. So, like, oh, that's, the gunslinger guy, or that's Lateef Crowder because he did this certain move, nope, that's Pedro Pascal because I can tell by the way that he's walking, particularly in the first season.
Or how he's running. There's a big difference in a person's gait, but then again, look at us. We're just grunts that watch people walk all our lives.
Yeah. But
nobody else is going to notice that.
But when you're watching the show, you see those nuances in the character because like you can recognize how the guy stands or how he moves just because of the way that they are. And I didn't connect with the Ahsoka show like that, because again, there's plot devices that I just don't like Sabine being a Jedi.
I can get over it. We'll see how it progresses, man.
Yeah.
In the end, I don't want to be too critical on it. I thought it was a damn entertaining show. I thought we got our money's worth in the end. You know what I mean? With a lot of things that came out of it.
Well, by comparison, and the sad part of it is one of the things that nobody's talking about. You have a lot of the pundits that do, like the guys that are just absolute Disney haters. They'll bring it up, but I absolutely agree that there's a big, huge struggle right now with Disney TV shows because people don't know what to expect, and so people aren't watching. You know what I mean?
They're not finishing the series.
And they're not finishing the
Watching
series.
decline in viewership.
Yeah, and
Well,
the viewership numbers are going to drop because, again, like, you can't continue to try and sell a message to a like Star Wars is supposed to be multi-generational, right? At the end of the day, what should be happening 15 years from now, 20 years from now, is you as a grandfather should be watching Star Wars with your daughters and their children. And that should be like a family thing that you do at Thanksgiving or the holidays, right?
well, that's my house.
Yes, now, right? But it needs to be designed to continue to be that way.
No, I agree completely. Yeah.
And I think that's part of it, is like trying to tell Star Wars with modern sensibilities is just it's foolish, you know.
No,
Like,
it needs to stay where it's at. I mean, remember, people don't understand it. This is family TV. This is family storytelling. You know, and I hope it stays in that realm. I don't want to see an R-rated Star Wars, for example. I'm not even interested.
yeah.
I'll say this at the end of it all, that there is some pretty cool takeaways, and there are some other cool questions. Well, not cool questions, but lingering questions.
Yeah.
I will say that I like that we're back. We're going to probably see Dathomir in live action.
Yeah, that's cool.
That is cool. That's all kinds of cool. And I also like the scene. It kind of fills into your point about Sabine and a Jedi being a Jedi. Is there's a scene at the end where Ahsoka is staring off into space, and Sabine doesn't understand what she's looking at.
Yeah.
Right. And Ahsoka makes a note of it. You know, like, oh well, the light right there. You don't know, and she didn't see anything. And then she smiles and walks away. And then you see Anakin, his Force ghost, just sitting there watching over. And I thought that was a really, really cool scene.
Well, it's a good touch, but the other part of it is like, why don't we see like Yoda or Qui-Gon or Obi-Wan?
But that's not. I don't know that that's relevant though.
But it is to Ahsoka's story, because when you think about Ahsoka's lineage, right? If you think about Ahsoka's lineage, it's like jujitsu and black belts, right? It's the same thing, right? Qui-Gon trained.
Oh. All the way. I mean? I'm with you all the way to Yoda, even Dooku.
So when you follow her lineage as a Jedi has had some of the most controversial Jedi Knights ever lived.
In the order
are part of Ahsoka's lineage, right? So for Ahsoka to be an unconventional Jedi makes absolute sense. It's like that's why Thrawn was like, well, crap, man, like we need to be ready for a frontal assault because they're going to come knocking on the door.
That's Anakin style.
Like, because Anakin never was the type of person to, you know, hey, I'm not going to maneuver out of contact. I'm just going to, you know, make the most audacious move that I can to make it happen. And so that part of it I liked, you know, and that's a thing. But again, that's extended universe stuff. So if you haven't read the Thrawn books and knew that Thrawn, you know, went on a mission with Anakin Skywalker to save Padme, you know, before the end of the Clone Wars, you've missed out on a huge chunk of the story. And I think that's part of it, is like Dave Filoni has so much information that it's hard to follow some of the stuff. If you're not a true, like, diehard Star Wars, read everything that comes out, read all the comic books, you know, watch all the TV shows, that kind of stuff. And so it's become a cottage industry, you know what I mean? And there's so much material in Star Wars that's very, very difficult to cover it all. You know, and that's the difference. It's kind of like X-Men comic books in the 80s, right? Like if you wanted to follow the Wolverine comic book, you couldn't. You had to read all the other X-Men titles to completely understand the whole universe, or you're just getting a small part of it that, you know, doesn't make a whole lot of sense, you know, discreetly. It has to be.
X-Men's one of those, you know, cool. I was really excited when it came to the live screen, but it didn't keep me there. You know what I mean? Well, just couldn't do it.
And it started from a really deep cut too, right? Because it was one of those shows that had a, you know, there's a lot of character building that happened in the comic books for the X-Men movie that people just didn't know. You know, for example, like when Wolverine's claws popped out for the first time, I knew what he was going to say before he even said it. Like, why? Because I'm a diehard Wolverine.
Duh, I've been reading those damn comic books since I was 16.
Right? Yeah, exactly. And I think
that's what.
But I think there's kind of that same level of expectation from Filoni and company as they presented Ahsoka. So the reason why The Mandalorian kind of worked the way that it did, and I will say that, people will complain about some episodes of Mando, but the reason why Mandalorian worked, particularly season 1, worked as well as it did was because season 1 literally was a story of the Mandalorian and Grogu, right? Hey, I've rescued this baby Yoda. I've got to protect him from all these other people that are trying to hunt him down. I go talk to the armor, and the armor is like, you got to take him to another space wizard. You know what I mean? And so that was the challenge, right? It was there. It was Lone Wolf and Cub.
All the way.
In the Star Wars universe, right? We got that. Everybody understood it. Simple principle. Everybody who's seen Shogun's Assassin or Lone Wolf and Cub kind of understood where that came from, and we kind of knew where it was going, right? And then season 2 happened, which was kind of a continuation, but then we added in the broader universe. And when you started bringing in the broader universe, that's when it kind of lost its way. Not to say that season 3 wasn't good, retaking Mandalore, all that other stuff.
I thought season 3 was great. There's too much hate going on out there.
But what I'm saying is, but to add all those other elements, there's an expectation that those parts of the story.
Mm.
And for fans, like guys like us that have watched the Clone Wars and will rewatch the Clone Wars every now and then, and we watch, other aspects of the show, like, it's okay for us. But for a casual fan, like, hey, I like Mary Elizabeth Winstead, I'm going to go watch the Ahsoka show because she's in it. Or I'm going to watch, the Ahsoka show because I like Rosario Dawson. Or, oh, this is the last thing that Ray Stevenson did, so I want to watch it because I like him. I'm a fan.
He was great, dude, and it's so sad that he's gone now because look at the questions that linger.
Yeah.
With him in that show.
Yeah.
And that was my exit questions. Who are the statues where Balin's standing at? Why are they significant? And if you didn't notice, I don't know if you caught it, but there was a flame in the background that he was staring at.
Yeah.
What the hell is he looking at? And then more importantly, where does all of that lead?
Yeah.
And sadly, the man died, man, at a horribly young age.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that Disney has to do, and again, I think everybody has to get comfortable with it, and not to say that, like, I want to see my favorite characters recast. I don't. However, if it makes sense for the story vehicle, like, dude, if you're going to bring in Luke Skywalker for season 2 of Ahsoka, like,
do it. He's around.
Call like, here's what you got to do. Pick up the phone, call Sebastian Stan, and be like, hey, how would you like to do Star Wars? You know what I mean? Like, Sebastian
he's perfect for it. We've talked about this for years now.
Yeah, he could legit pull it off, right? And so that's really what we need. We need these.
I think he could do it without CGI.
Yeah,
quite frankly,
as fans, we have to be willing to accept changes like that to advance the story in a way that's going to make it more valuable,
productive, valuable.
Right?
Yeah.
You can't, as much as we like Mark Hamill as Luke Skywalker, like.
Mark Hamill is Luke Skywalker.
Yeah, but he's way too.
But man, what is he? Is 65, 70 now?
Yeah, he's getting to the point where he's old enough where, yes, he could probably do it as a voice actor, but we probably shouldn't think about him as a
player on screen.
Yeah, exactly. You know what I mean? And I think we should be okay with that. It's the same thing, but Disney has a problem doing that, right? They straight up have a problem doing that. And the reason why they have a problem doing that is because they would rather go in a different direction than say, hey, look, Chadwick Boseman died. Let's find another actor that can play him. Or use, the blip or the snap or whatever, the multiverse of madness or whatnot, and have frickin', Michael B. Jordan come back as a different variation of T'Challa to play the Black Panther. I think everybody would have been like, I'm in, right? I'd have been perfectly okay with that if they were like, hey, look, interdimensional rift, Spider-Man Far From Home, the T'Challa of this universe died, but we got, the good good version of Killmonger. He's now the Black Panther. Like everybody would have accepted that. But instead we get Riri Williams and, Shuri taking over as the Black Panther. And again, nothing against the actress, but I think there would have been a better way of honoring Chadwick Boseman. Would have been able to continue the story of T'Challa with another actor rather than just ending it because of his unfortunate passing. And that's what I'm hoping for in the same sense with
he was another one.
You know what I mean?
He was a young man, dude.
Yeah.
And to answer the audience's question, Mark Hamill is currently 73 years old. Or excuse me, 71 years old.
He's 71 years old. And so, and if you look at the rate of how things are going, so the writer strike is potentially ending. The actor strike has not. And so when you look at the actor strike, you're looking at least until the end of the year. And if they were trying to bring Luke Skywalker into, acting of some sort, he'll be 71, 72 years old. And hey, no offense to anyone. And I will say this, and I don't care who you are, what profession you're in. I don't give a damn what job you do. When you're in your 70s, you need to be drinking Mai Tais on a beach or hanging out with your grandkids. And if you're not doing that, I question everything about you, right? It goes from politicians to actors, or just go out and have fun, man. Be like Bill Shatner. Go to all these Comic-Cons and just meet your fans because, hey, you're not
Shatner. I consider the greatest standard of that. Man, Shatner's in his 90s, dude.
Yeah, and
he went into space. Who does real life tough guy? I mean,
yeah.
And Shatner's something else, dude. He really is. Mark Hamill, though, he's put on some weight. He's an older man. He's a senior citizen now.
Yeah, and
it's time to leave him the hell alone. I love your suggestion.
Yeah,
about having Sebastian replace him.
And there's nothing against Mark Hamill, right?
No.
Mark Hamill, you are the torchbearer for Luke Skywalker, but it's okay for you to pass the torch. And I think that's literally what we're trying to see right now. I think that's what all these Star Wars shows have been, honestly. And we can wrap with this, but all these Disney shows that have been on since Disney purchased Lucasfilm, they've all been efforts to try and receive the baton from George Lucas. You physically, you know what I mean? Lucasfilm was purchased by Disney, but the baton was truly never passed because creatively they didn't pick up where George left off, And I think that's the biggest disjunct. It's look, you can do whatever you want. I get it, but I can tell you, an intellectual property like Star Wars should be like crack. I dangle a little bit out in front of you, and then people just scoop it up and they want more. And we're getting the exact opposite of that with Disney Lucasfilm. And I think
with their management, it has not. In the end, Filoni's going to get given that torch, dude.
I hope.
And he should. You know, give it to him for sure.
I mean,
but if as long as he's having to deal with the production.
Yeah, if George Lucas
executive producers like they have at Disney, he's always going to be hamstrung.
Yeah, if George Lucas is not the executive producer on every Disney thing from here on out until he decides to walk away, there's something wrong, right? He's the guy. He wrote the story treatments. The story treatments, if you looked at all the leaked things that came out for episodes, the sequel trilogy, everything was it was heading in a different direction. And it's unfortunate that it didn't get there. And hopefully at some point, Filoni has the skills. Between him, Favreau, and George Lucas sitting down, they could probably rewrite the whole thing where the sequel trilogy didn't happen, and make it believable. But at this point, I would legitimately like to see hey, look, Heir to the Empire is the way to go, right? Thrawn's back. Let's just go with the Heir.
Luke's back. Mara Jade.
You could build.
There's a lot of cool shit going down there.
You could build that world and say that whole incident with Anakin and Ahsoka in the World Between Worlds changed the dynamic of what happened. But who knows? Anyway, this is Rob and Dave for No Disintegrations. We have been talking about the Ashoka finale and just some other stuff in Star Wars and just pop culture in general. Looking forward to seeing what season 2 has to hold. A lot of unanswered questions. Hey, what was Balin looking at? What's going to happen to Shin Hati? is, Ahsoka and Sabine going to be regulated to playing Robin Hood and protecting this roving band of minstrels?
They are adorable. Leave them alone.
I just don't know. You know what I mean? There's a lot of open questions. Now that Ezra is back with the Rebel fleet, like at some point, are they going to take it seriously? Like, yo, Thrawn is back. Like that should be the first like it shouldn't have been, it shouldn't have been Hera staring at Ezra going, oh my gosh, it's Ezra. Is that you? Like, it's like, hey, yo, I got something to tell you, bro. Like Thrawn is here. We need to start ramping up because the Empire is going to attack us. Right. That's it. And I think if we go down, if we go down an alternate dimension timeline, I get it. Everybody's doing it. Like Marvel tried it first and DC's tried it as well. The bottom line is that is a contemporary thought process. Everybody's doing multiverses. So I'm okay if there's a Star Wars multiverse, if it erases the worst parts of Star Wars and brings in better parts of Star Wars. But I don't know if we're ever going to get that.
I doubt it. They don't want to retcon the sequels. I think you're the hair to the Empire is the greatest way to go.
Yeah,
the greatest way to go. I don't know why they didn't do it before, but Kathleen Kennedy said there wasn't any source material for her to work with. So
there's only like 300 books and comics.
There's comics too. Comics are awesome for you out there who like comics, but you like storyboarded storytelling. By all means, look into the Star Wars comic book, especially the Vader comics. I'm a huge fan of those. Dig in deep. You will not be disappointed.
Yeah, and that's how it's going to be. But for No Disintegrations, I'm Rob, along with
Dave.
Yeah, we'll be talking to you guys for the next one. And until then, be on the lookout. We may do something special if something else breaks and is new. If you haven't watched The Continental, that would be what I would tell you. That's what I'm watching right now. That's the latest and greatest. And looking forward to talking to you guys again. Anyway, we'll talk to you guys later. Thanks.
Bye.